Okay, how does it look?
It looks beautiful.
Great. And I'm going to stop sharing for just a second.
Welcome, everyone. We still have some folks trickling in, so we'll get started in about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. All right, I know we have a full session, so I want to get started and make sure you guys get all your time. So hello, everyone. My name is Sasha. I am the host today. I'm being assisted by our co-moderator, Ronnie, who is in the chat there, and Matt Kelly's helping out with tech and accessibility. Here we are looking at the Navigating the Edges, a design approach to Blue Core, and this presentation is being presented by members of Blue Core, a new collaboration between Cornell University, the University of California, Davis, the Library of Congress, University of Pennsylvania, and Stanford University. Representing Blue Core are Nancy Lorimer from Stanford University and Laura Daniels from Cornell University, Jeremy Nelson from Stanford University, technical lead for Blue Core, and Callie Mathos from Stanford University, product owner for Blue Core. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much for being here. This is Navigating the Edges, a design approach to Blue Core. We have a lot of ground to cover today. Welcome. If you have not heard of Blue Core yet, we are a collaboration to bring BibFrame cataloging to production. This photo is from the James Madison Memorial Building at the Library of Congress on one of the first trips we took to LC to discuss Blue Core. As Sasha provided in the overview, our membership at this time includes the University of California, Davis, Cornell University, Library of Congress, University of Pennsylvania, and Stanford University. The vision for Blue Core is shared here with a link to our website. The bold and underlined texts are my own emphasis. These, to me, are the central pillars of the project, and our efforts rely on the principles that inform the vision. These principles also align with what we are solving for. I shared the vision last year, so I won't go in great depth, but it is useful to revisit. In this presentation, I will be citing and quoting a paper by Rachel Ivy Clark titled Toward a Design Epistemology for Librarianship, which was published by the Library Quarterly in January of 2018. It has been in my personal toolbox for several years, and I return to it often, particularly when working on designing systems or workflows, and solutions to what she refers to as wicked problems, problems that might be better solved through the lens of design disciplines rather than traditional science disciplines. Her dissertation on design epistemologies and American librarianship is titled It's Not Library Rocket Science, for some added context, though sometimes it feels like it is. My hope in these next few slides is to translate the work that has gone on in the Blue Core working groups during the prototyping phase and ground it in this research. So Clark calls back to early design scholars to look at how wicked problems are solved. While gaining complexity over time, design processes are iterative and align with our work in Blue Core. This process happens in the larger scope of an overall project and happens within each phase. In the prototype phase, we have practiced each of these steps in multiple iterations, which helps us iterate on the project in its entirety. So the analysis stage involves activities to understand the problem. This stage can happen throughout the stages as understanding the problem is thought to be in many ways more important than creating the solution. And it changes as more information and knowledge is gained through experimenting, questioning, or framing and reframing. This means viewing a problem many different ways and from many different perspectives, including library patrons and library staff, oftentimes simultaneously. We might also set boundaries around where a problem stops and another problem begins. Clark writes that it was Brian Lawson who pointed out that it is a designer's ability to identify the problems, not solutions, that distinguishes good design from bad design. Otherwise, you might have to go back and redo your solution to accommodate the problems you missed earlier. The synthesis stage gathers information from the first phase and attempts to create a solution to the problem. This stage is far more complicated than does the solution work and can contain many aspects of additional analysis and shifting, new, or ill-defined problems. However, it is an attempt to create something. The evaluation stage is a moment of reflection and assessment to see how well the solution fits the problem. In both design and librarianship, we are concerned with how well the solution will improve our capacity for service, improve the needs of our patrons, and improve overall services. And this service-oriented approach is what makes design strategies such a good fit for libraries. And then you rinse and repeat as needed. So this process may be repeated several times, and it could be repeated within a particular stage until the solution fits the problem adequately. Last year, we presented on Blue Core, and I've linked to that presentation and our slides to give you a sense for where we were last year and provide context for what we'll share today. Last year, we were planning for the prototype, and this year we've been working on building it. This is not a full-scale system. It is a right-sized, modest system that can help us answer questions about where to go next. Iteration, repertoire, reflection and action, use of representations, and abductive reasoning are all strategies Clark discusses and that we've used during this synthesis phase where we were trying to create a solution. And that's the Blue Core prototype. In the following slides, we'll provide an overview of these topics, and for the bolded items here, we'll speak in greater detail. So there are several design opportunities, so reframing our challenges or problems a little bit more positively, that we're investigating during the Blue Core prototyping phase, and these three stand out as areas where many smaller issues converge, and they are the easiest ones to speak about. The first one we'll focus on in like this kind of overview is BibFrame origins. So BibFrame can come from many different places. Now we're very lucky, right? We've made a lot of progress with BibFrame, and it can be created in many different ways. BibFrame generated from MARC conversion has its own unique qualities. BibFrame converted from MARC may look different depending on which version of the MARC conversion specifications were used in processing. It may also look different based on how the BibFrame ontology was implemented or has changed over time. BibFrame created in Sinopia with PCC templates follows a standard form, though it has also evolved over time. And while BibFrame created in Marva with LC profiles looks very similar, there are small differences. I've listed several topics on the right-hand side of this slide that have helped us navigate ingesting data from the Library of Congress BibFrame database and being able to open, edit, and save it in the Sinopia or Marva editor while thinking ahead to other future consuming applications down the line. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide as Nancy Lorimer, my supervisor, will speak in greater detail about designing metadata workflows, but to help orient you for what she will share, consider moving from a legacy ILS to a more modular LSP and how it enables us to shift cataloging work for works and instances outside of the local system and how that requires rethinking the entire cataloging data flow. Opportunity 3 centers around description sets. So Blue Core has ingested concise bounded descriptions, or CBD, to build a foundation of data from the Library of Congress BibFrame database. Concise bounded descriptions act like a package of data. They are describing a subgraph of an overall RDF graph and include statements about the resources it contains. These subgraphs have proven useful for the interchange of bibframe data between data pools. And one current investigation is how we can ingest RDF from the BFDB, receive regular updates from LC, while also adding Blue Core specific statements that are not overwritten upon update. This raises a lot of interesting questions about what statements could be added, how long of a description is too long, and technically how to solve for updating half of a linked data description set instead of an entire set, given that the resources are given a Blue Core URI upon ingest with a BF derived from property linking to its derived URI. And if you're interested about this, in the overall slide of the 3 opportunities, there are links to a talk Philip Skur from Stanford University gave, and another paper by Rachel Ivy Clark about conceptualizing bibliographic data that were really helpful for me in thinking about how things change with linked data. And now I'm going to turn it over to Laura Daniels from Cornell to speak about Blue Core and open data.
Thanks, Kelly. So I believe that openness is foundational to everything we do in libraries. And by open in this context, what I'm specifically thinking about is that open data is freely available for use and reuse. I'm also thinking that it is transparent about who created it, where it was created, what it was derived from, and that it's created and maintained collaboratively according to shared standards and practices. So our current shared metadata models often rely on institutions making and storing copies of bibliographic and authority data and/or rely heavily on third-party organizations such as vendors to access descriptions. Some critiques of BibFrame have included that in order to affect a transition to linked data in libraries, a central triple store would have to be designed, created, and maintained, since one of the fundamental tenets of the linked data ethos is not to copy data locally, but to store it centrally. So enter Blue Core. I would say that a single data store to rule them all is never going to exist, but an open, collaboratively created and maintained data store does effectively counter this particular concern. Next slide, please. I have been much more involved in the Folio community than I have in the LD4, and I hope that my time there has helped inform my approach to participating in Blue Core. So I wanted to share some of the lessons that I've learned with Folio. And one of those is really starting with the need, and that comes back to identifying what is the problem, what's the wicked problem we're trying to solve. And it particularly for me includes being willing to be very basic, and then to repeat. I should perhaps say rinse, repeat. And the example that I think of this in the Folio context is when we were trying to work on a way to handle bound widths. And we had multiple meetings with developers, and we shared several different libraries, shared examples from our databases of, okay, this is this bound width, this is what it looks like, these are the things in it. I felt like we had explained it 200 times. And then one of the developers, after like an hour of this, said, it sounds like you want to take a bunch of unrelated things and bind them together and like represent that in your catalog. And we're like, yes. This is what we've been saying for 2 hours. It took us 2 hours to actually convince them that yes, this crazy thing that they thought no one would ever want to do was exactly what we were asking for. And we actually now have, I think, a pretty good solution available in Folio for bound widths. Then I also think a lot about our assumptions and how failure to identify our assumptions can lead us astray. And so once again, this goes back to being very, very explicit about very basic things. And this is less of a success story than the bound widths, but I want to tell the story of the effective call number in Folio, which is basically a way for the item record to inherit a property from a holdings record, which seems very straightforward. So if there is a call number specified on an item record, that is your effective call number. If there's no call number specified, then the item gets it from the holdings record. And we described this and we got something that works that way. But because of the way it was implemented, and this is because we didn't iterate enough and we didn't do that rinsing and repeating, we failed to articulate the fact that we wanted this property to exist whether there was an item record or not. And so the way that it was implemented, it only works if there's an item. And so this is one of those lessons that I constantly remind myself of, that I need to identify my own assumptions and I need to lay those bare. And I need to, first of all, validate that my assumptions are relevant, and then make sure I understand what everybody else's assumptions are, and then go from there. So I hope that is helping us with the work we are doing. And now I believe I'm passing over to Nancy.
Hi, well, with that great intro to, I am Nancy Lorimer, Associate Head of Metadata Services. Yes, I am Callie's supervisor, but I don't supervise her that much. On the other hand, as Laura was saying, we have to talk about very, very basic structures about and make sure that we actually know what everyone is talking about and everyone understands that they are talking about the same thing. It is amazing how long you can go on saying one word and find out a month later that everybody had a different meaning for that same word. But for me, as a former cataloger and head of catalogers, Blue Core is all about metadata, open access to that metadata, and sharing it rather than copying resource descriptions. And by this last, I mean, as Laura said earlier, rather than copy a Blue Core description into our local library system, as we currently have to do with MARC, we will use the Blue Core store, which I'll call the Blue Store afterwards, so don't trip over my tongue, as the source of truth, mapping as necessary to the local system for very local functions and at times display. And because of this, we need to really clearly understand the workflows catalogers use and how they work in the linked data environment. So the metadata workflows group has started analyzing the workflows to start of an individual cataloger cataloging individual items and interpreting them for the Blue Core environment using our two editors, Sinopia and Marva. So far, more with Sinopia because that's just the one we have more active use of at the moment. Most of these, if you are a cataloger, most of these workflows will look patently familiar. They don't change overly much in some ways, but there are differences. And so we are categorizing them rather than calling things like original cataloging or copy cataloging about the actions that the actual cataloger is doing. So first we have enhance metadata. We add more metadata to an existing description. We correct a metadata in an existing description. We add links to related descriptions. This is what you might call an equivalent to copy cataloging in MARC, though we will see there are a few important differences, and we are trying to get out of the idea of copy, seeing we are not copying the record. This is the only workflow currently supported in the Blue Core prototype, so this is the first one we will be seeing. We will also create metadata, meaning creating new descriptions or portions of descriptions without any pre-existing data, or perhaps from some stub data from outside resources. Generally, this is the equivalent to original cataloging in MARC, again, with a few added wrinkles. And our third basic workflow is derive, in which we create new descriptions or portions of descriptions by duplicating metadata from any existing description and repurposing it through editing as a new description with a new URI. This is generally known as derived original cataloging in the MARC environment. And in my last little block there, we are also looking at the connection between the Blue Core store and our library service providers, or ILSs. We still will have them for holdings data and local data and acquisitions data and all that stuff. So we do have to link to them. And so for that, let's work at the workflows. To start, I will say we are only looking at metadata originating in Blue Core not a local ILS or LSP or outside source. And not that we won't use them, but this is what we're starting to look at first. So let's start with a workflow for Enhance. This is a very obvious workflow. A cataloger searches for existing descriptions using the editor of their choice, Marva or Sinopia, in the Blue store. And lo and behold, they find a work and instance that are equivalent to their own, that somebody else already owns this item and therefore cataloged it. If they wish, and that's why this is marked as optional, that you can open up the description in the editor, add anything, modifications they want to add, and save that in Blue Core. It is then saved. They then save it in Blue Core and they link the bundled description to their ILS in whichever way they do it. In the case of Folio, which is my local system as well as Laura's, this means mapping the Blue Core metadata to that of the inventory instance JSON record that works as an operational record, linking the descriptive metadata, the holdings, the orders, etc., and may also provide basic display in a discovery layer in some cases. I'll just say one wrinkle here is that since Blue Core is the metadata of truth, any enhancements done to the Blue Core description need to be communicated to any library that holds that item, not only to your own library. In this way is a way to keep the metadata in sync. And also, I will say from the cataloger end of things, enhancing cataloging shows again the necessity of providing a very strong community norms for what kind of enhancements we do. And with built-in permissions and versioning, strong permissions and strong versioning to support those norms. Next slide, please. The create workflow starts very much the same, searching for existing descriptions, but in this case, nothing found. In that case, the cataloger creates the bit framework and instance in the editor and loads them into Blue Core. The bundled description, again, is saved in Blue Core and links to the cataloger's ILS. This is really the very simplest workflow on first glance, since it really only affects the actual cataloger and their particular ILS to start. Then next slide. Finally, we have derived. In the case described in this particular diagram, and there's very many ways to do derive, the cataloger finds a equivalent work, bitframe work in Blue Core, but the attached instance is for a different instance. The most common example perhaps may be a corrected edition of that work or an electronic version instead of a print. The same content in a different format. In this case, the cataloger might open the variant instance description in the Blue Core editor and then duplicate that instance as the basis for creation of their own new instance. In this way, they don't have to recopy all the metadata. They can just duplicate it and then make what changes are necessary for their new instance. So again, this new instance and its work would be linked to the cataloger's ILS. The original instance would not, because presumably if the cataloger did not own that instance in the first place. On the other hand, the interesting part about this is when they save the work, they might, when they create this new instance, they may possibly do some enhancing of that work that remains the same. And while that new instance and work goes to their catalog, what happens with the modified work? And we're wondering whether that modified work also has to go to other people's catalogs or ILSs without any new instance involved in order to keep their ILSs in sync. So this is actually a fairly complicated thing to do, and it's actually kind of complicated thing to say, and I hope that was clear. So, so this slide and all the other slides above address linking to the ILS here, as I was just saying. But what might happen there is already a base record. But we don't. What happens if there is already a base record in that ILS? I will only address workflows for Folio here since Alma, which is our other ILS, is somewhat different. In Folio, order records can be attached to, as we mentioned before, the inventory instance, confusing kind of name, which is a JSON record. In MARC cataloging, a cataloger might take the equivalent acquisition record and build on it to create a fully cataloged record. This would be also a nice idea with linked data. The less duplicative typing, of course, the better. And we do not want to repeat data. So the dream for us is actually to take a Blue Core instance, open it up in our editor, and create a new work instance pair that complete cataloging and refresh the instance. So these are some of the workflows we started looking at. There are, of course, dozens of workflows for catalogers, but these are the three basic ones and a little additional thought that we have come up with for people, for the developers to work with. And I guess I pass it on to who's next, which I do not know.
Thank you so much, Nancy and
Oh, I
Laura.
think we have our update, don't we?
Yeah, I'm going to
Jeremy.
hand it over to Jeremy.
All right, thank you, Kelly. I will share my screen. So we currently are towards the end of our development of the prototype stage, and it's been a good experience. Multiple institutions have participated in the prototype development. Developers from Stanford and Cornell, along with support from UC Davis, have all contributed to where we're currently at. In the prototype, we've deployed a development environment, and it's right now on my screen. So here, it's really Blue Core is a lot of back-end services. And so there's not a lot to see in terms of the UI, but I'll try my best to be able to just to show some various aspects of Blue Core and what it looks like. As Callie and Nancy and Laura have mentioned, primarily catalogers will be interacting with Blue Core either through Sinopia or Marva, linked data editors. So those are going to be their primary user interface interactions with Blue Core. However, we do have requirements that go beyond those editors for such things as batch updates or batch ingestion. Also, since this was really a brand new project, and around the same time as Blue Core was coming together, you may have heard of ChatGPT and generative AI. So we wanted to be conscientious and really sort of think about the technology choices that we made that would allow us to start leveraging some of the generative AI capabilities that have sort of opened up some, I think, to me, really exciting opportunities on how we can use AI to enhance and improve cataloger workflows. And by being mindful of those, it really informed our design decisions as we've built out the current Blue Core stack. Now, here you can kind of see the front end. We have some major components. We have the actual API that allows clients and primarily will be Sinopia and Marva to interact with the Blue Core database. And one thing I want to show real quick is this might be helpful to provide a little bit of context.
And just to note, you have 3 minutes left in the presentation.
Okay, well, real quick. Okay. So I won't show that then. So we have, in terms of our stack, we try to use all open source software as well as using uh, uh, projects that are also used in other library systems. So for our authentication and authorization, we're using Keycloak, which Folio's Eureka upgrade will use. We're using Apache Airflow to manage batch ingest and also other um, uh, more workflow based uh, tasks that need to get done. And also, I want to show real quickly, we've been working on a update to Sinopia to actually use Blue Core. And if you use Sinopia before and its editor, this may look similar, but one of the things we've done is we've changed the branding, we've changed the color scheme. And one big thing we've done is integrated with Keycloak instead of using the AWS authentication for our technology that we used before. So if I log in here, I'm just using a login. It's very similar to what you'd expect in Sinopia or Sinopia Classic, but now we're using Keycloak instead of AWS. As we're developing or working on supporting search through the API in the database, and that'll be implemented within the next month and a half. So initially during the prototype phase, we want to be able to do basic searches, bring up a resource, any found resources in Blue Core, and be able to edit those. And so I think we're on track to be able to do that. I think that's probably close to my time. So I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Jeremy. So we just have one last slide. After we're finished with the prototyping phase, we will enter a period of evaluation. So calling back to that, let me just share my screen real fast. Calling back to those design phases. So we will be assessing the prototype and thinking about how we want to move forward with the MVP, and look forward to sharing that work with the community as we get ready for 2026. So that will be another kind of cycle of design, building, and assessing our work. So thanks, everyone. And please let us know what you think. And if you have questions, we're available on Slack, and I'll check the chat as soon as we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. There are a few questions for you in the chat if you have time to take a look. But we want to get started with Trina. If you have your slides here, we can get you started. It's so exciting how far you all have come in the last year. That's wonderful. All right, beautiful. Thank you, Trina. So now we're going to see the right tools for the right job, linking training to linked data. Trina's going to be giving the presentation, but her colleague Ava worked on this as well. Ava Brillet is a senior instructor at the Library of Congress. Her work focuses on empowering staff to leverage information systems more effectively for their work. Her most recent projects have focused on training for a linked data environment. Trina, who's presenting today, is a cataloging policy specialist at the Library of Congress. She maintains and develops the library's subject vocabularies and descriptive cataloging policies. Her work focuses on making cataloging practices understandable, applicable, and interesting. Trina, please.
Thank you, Sasha. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me at today's session. As you just heard, my name is Trina Soderquist. I'm a cataloging policy specialist in the Policy Training and Cooperative Programs Division at the Library of Congress. My co-presenter is Ava Brillet, a senior instructor in PTCP. Unfortunately, she could not attend today, but we worked together to create this presentation. So today I'll be using the ADDIE instructional design model to frame our presentation. For our analysis, we will look at the shift from pilot to production, our learner population, and constraints and opportunities. For the design segment, we will discuss adult learning, flipped classrooms, and lesson planning. Our look at the training development will focus on the tools we use to create our training and how we made the training materials accessible. During the implementation segment, we will look at how at our training timeline and how we delivered the training materials. And finally, our training evaluation will consider how we collected feedback, the iterative nature of this training, and what lies ahead for the library's catalogers. So let's begin with a brief look at the shift from BibFrame cataloging pilots to working in full production in BibFrame. The first BibFrame cataloging pilot began in September 2015, and it was followed by the Phase 2 pilot in June 2017 and the Phase 2 expansion 2 years later. These pilots involved dozens of catalogers and were designed to test the viability of the BibFrame editors and to get feedback from catalogers on their ability to work in a linked data editor. During the pilots, catalogers entered bibliographic descriptions twice, once in the BibFrame editor and a second time in MARC. BF Prod, or BibFrame in Production, is a project to fully incorporate Marva Quartz into the library's daily cataloging practices, eliminating the need to enter the same bibliographic description separately in 2 systems. Metadata descriptions created or updated in Marva Quartz are converted into MARC records in Folio and then are distributed. BF Prod began in August 2024 with 5 catalogers from the library's Acquisitions and Bibliographic Access Directorate. So our BibFrame training was designed for the cataloging librarians, library technicians, and their supervisors in the Acquisitions and Bibliographic Access Directorate, or ABA. As you can see from this slice of the library's organizational chart, ABA is part of Discovery and Preservation Services, which is part of the Library Collections and Services Group. LCSG also includes Researcher and Collection Services, which includes special collections like the Geography and Map Division and the Music Division. RCS decided to wait to do BibFrame training after Folio implementation. So this allowed our BibFrame training and the BF Prod project to focus primarily on monograph cataloging. So our pool of learners came from ABA, but did not include 3 of its divisions: the Acquisitions, Fiscal, and Overseas Support Division, not shown here, the Network Development and MARC Standards Office, and the Policy Training and Cooperative Programs Division. NDMSO is responsible for managing id.loc.gov and the BibFrame database, and they created the Marva Quartz Linked Data Editor. PTCP, which is where Ava and I are situated, was tasked with developing the BibFrame training. The third member of our training team was Paul Frank, who also created the Marva manual. So as you might guess from looking at the names of the individual cataloging divisions in ABA, these divisions handle resources in a wide range of languages, scripts, and formats. So after collecting and confirming information from section heads and division chiefs, we ended up with a list of over 400 potential learners. Over half of them were librarians, almost a quarter were library technicians, an eighth were supervisors, and the remaining learners were contractors or volunteers, or they held another position. So you can probably imagine what some of our constraints were. The overseas offices literally spanned the globe, requiring us to block off training cohorts for individual offices and work outside our normal business hours. Similarly, we had to be flexible with scheduling sessions for our contractors, many of whom work evenings and weekends. An additional constraint was the fact that Marva is not being used for serials cataloging. Because of our arrangement with the concert program, the library's serials catalogers are still working in OCLC. But we encouraged serials catalogers to attend the training sessions because we believed that a well-informed cataloger can advocate for the Marva functionality that they need to do their work. A third constraint was the ongoing development of Marva Quartz. As learners were brought into training and as more catalogers and library technicians began using the tool, NDMSO received more feedback than ever before, prompting them to add features and functionality. And don't forget that while this was happening, the library was also engaged in folio training, putting a strain on learners' capacities to process new information. On the other hand, this provided the training team with the opportunity to build our work off of the training plan being implemented for Folio and the Library Collections and Access Platform, or LCAP. Finally, our training focused on tasks and processes, not workflows. So early in the training development, we were encouraged by PTCP senior instructor Tara Hagan to focus on Marva as a tool. Limiting our scope allowed us to provide more targeted instruction while letting learners decide how to integrate their new skills into their workflows. So this brings us to the design process for the ABA staff training modules. First, I'd like to review Malcolm Knowles' adult learning theory to understand the distinct learning patterns of adult learners. Need to know. Adults prefer to know and understand the reasoning behind the instruction. Foundation. Instruction that acknowledges and leverages adult learners' previous experience is more likely to be successful. Self-concept. It is critical to build in the freedom for adult learners to choose their learning path. Readiness. Adults are often the most motivated to learn concepts that directly or immediately impact their work lives. Orientation. In most cases, adults prefer instruction that follows problem-based learning. And finally, motivation. Adults are more likely to respond to internal motivators than external motivators. So after considering these principles and our audience, we chose to adapt training being used and developed at the library for LCAP and Folio. We coupled a flipped classroom model with synchronous online sessions to provide contextual information that allowed learners to understand the need for instruction. In a traditional classroom or training environment, learners receive the first exposure to new content in the classroom and must process the material on their own time. In the flipped classroom model, learners explore the content on their own first, and synchronous training time is focused on processing, including working through problems and issues. As a result, the flipped classroom experience allows adult learners to guide their own learning and highlight what skills they wish to learn, as it directly impacts their work experience. Here's how our flipped classrooms and synchronous online sessions worked. First, the staff cohort being trained received introductory material via email that included the online synchronous session schedule and the links to the online modules. The first online synchronous session provided an overview of how to access the modules and lessons and how to engage with the content. Staff were then encouraged to complete one module prior to the second synchronous session, where we fielded questions based on the completed modules. This was followed by 3 more synchronous office hour type sessions focused on practice and staff questions. Learning support was delivered by a dedicated Microsoft Teams chat where learners could help each other or provide feedback to the developers in NDMSO. The training team also encouraged learners to create their own localized support groups to help each other solve problems and solidify workflows. Finally, learners had continual access to the Marva manual, session recordings available on Confluence, and the online modules. So to create the modules, the training team first identified learning objectives and created a scaffolded design for the content. This provided the structure for each module, which was broken down into short lessons. We recorded and edited the videos and hosted them on our internal staff training website to ensure library-wide availability. This structure allowed learners to identify and navigate the training quickly based on their own needs and previous experience. Learners who had a strong grasp of linked data principles or who knew the history of BibFrame at the library, for example, could navigate to and spend longer time on other modules. Most of the lessons included knowledge application activities, which were intended to be open-ended explorations of Marva and related tools. Learners were also encouraged to complete surveys after each lesson. These surveys provided us with immediate feedback on errors or areas where learners had questions. They also allowed us to keep track of learners' progress, which could then be added to their training transcript. Continuing to follow the ADDIE model, we'll briefly talk about the development of the training materials, highlighting the tools we used. So after outlining the content to be included in the modules, we created templates for the scripts, the PowerPoint slides, and the knowledge application activities to keep our delivery consistent. We recorded our videos using Camtasia. For the training website, we used WordPress to create separate pages for each module, with all the lessons for an individual module gathered on a single page. For accessibility, Scripts and PowerPoint slides were included for download, and all videos included captioning. On the website, headings were used consistently to help with navigation. We deliberately chose to host materials on our training website to ensure continued and easy access to all LC staff. But most of the training materials are now also available publicly at the Catalogers Learning Workshop site. So let's talk in more detail about the training implementation. In this section, we'll discuss how we managed the training process to ensure all staff were trained within our timeframe. So as mentioned earlier, BF Prod began in August with 5 catalogers from the Acquisitions and Bibliographic Access Directorate. They were followed by groups of catalogers who had previously participated in the library's BibFrame cataloging pilots. These early training cohorts received synchronous online training that loosely followed the learning structure being developed by the training team. So at this time, while Paul Frank was onboarding the initial cohorts, Ava and I were preparing training materials, gathering content for videos, recording them, and setting up a training space online that learners could return to as necessary. In early January, it was determined that we needed to train all ABA catalogers by the end of March. We began with 1-hour sessions for supervisors to introduce the material to them and to help them begin coaching their staff. To accommodate all the learners in ABA, we arranged the training in 2-week spans, with each of the 11 cohorts having up to 30 learners. These numbered cohorts overlapped. While Ava and I were onboarding cohort 5, for example, Paul was hosting office hours for cohort 4. Some learners chose to attend multiple cohorts. So many supervisors attended sessions with their staff, and many catalogers in the initial cohorts later attended a numbered cohort. So in all, we reached 360 learners, with some people attending more than one cohort or session. Some of the components that helped our training implementation succeed were establishing the time schedule and the scale of the training program. The bulk of the training took place over 12 weeks from January 21st to April 11th, when we managed overlapping numbered cohorts. Organizing groups of learners by cohort created a shared experience that allowed individuals to identify fellow learners and peer coaches. Our online modules provided clear, consistent messaging for learners, and by regularly scheduling sessions and repeating them weekly, we were able to accommodate many learners, some of whom dropped into additional sessions. All the sessions for the overseas offices and all of the office hours were recorded, so learners could catch up if they were not able to attend at their scheduled time. So as we consider our evaluation of the BibFrame and MARVA training, we will refer to the Kirkpatrick model. This method for evaluating the effectiveness of training begins with the first level of criteria, reaction. The surveys offered at the end of each online lesson asked respondents to report on their confidence levels before and after training, thus capturing their initial reaction and allowing us to gauge the effectiveness of the training. Since the surveys were adapted from the LCAP training plan, our learners were already familiar with the format. To assess learning, the survey included areas for respondents to share specific feedback, including what they learned and what they wish had been covered in more detail. This helped us improve and develop the training materials. Our Microsoft Teams chat for catalogers working at BibFrame offered plenty of examples of the behavioral impact of the training, showing us how learners use their new skills to assist each other. We also have anecdotal evidence of behavioral changes attributed to the BibFrame and MARVA training. The relative stability of the MARVA Quartz linked data editor led to catalogers preferring to work in MARVA during the library's transition to Folio. The information we gathered from our surveys, the Teams chat, and personal narratives provided us with rich feedback that we can use on future training iterations, including finishing out our 4th and final module, which is still in development. The fact that our BibFrame and MARVA training program coincided with our ongoing LCAP implementation provided us with a unique opportunity to consider the nature of change in the workplace. We wanted our learners to feel empowered, able to rely on their knowledge of cataloging to help them understand a new tool and adapt it to their individual working styles. We also worked hard to keep the training informative and useful, but also entertaining and interesting. It is our hope that our fast-paced, high-energy transition to BibFrame and production encourage the ABA staff to be flexible and confident in the face of this change and future changes. The adoption of the Marva Quartz linked data editor as we transitioned into Folio and LCAP seemed to bear this out. And we hope to capitalize on this energy as we look forward to learning about official RDA in the coming months. So thank you again for joining me today. Please feel free to email us if you have any questions or comments. And if there's time, I will take questions now.
Thank you so much, Trina. You do have some time. So folks, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat or in the Slack and we can get them to her. Oh, we have one that came in. I may have missed this, but what does LCAP stand for?
That's the Library Collections and Access Platform. So it's our new library service provider. It's sort of, I have a slide about this actually, but it sort of encompasses the discovery layer as well as all of the folio applications and all sorts of other things that are involved. So it's sort of the broader picture of what we're doing. I see the question about the trainings are publicly available. Sorry to beat you to that, Sasha. Yes, they're on Catalogers Learning Workshop, which is a service provided by the Library of Congress. The Cenobia training is there. I think somebody mentioned that earlier today. But the BibFrame, the Marva manual and the videos that, the training videos that we put together are there. I think the transcripts are there too, but I think the knowledge application activities are not. Oh, and thank you for including that link. So surprises during the training process, I guess, or anything that was easier or harder than I anticipated. I think putting together the videos was a lot more complicated than I anticipated, just gathering the content. And because Marva was being developed, sometimes it was hard to like pin down the product. So that's why, for example, I'm trying to put together a video about subject headings, assigning subject headings using Marva. But you know, I've been keeping up with the chat to see what people's questions are, and so it's just hard to pin down exactly what I need to address and how I can address it. I guess the other surprising thing is sometimes I've noticed people sort of would ask us, like during the first session, how many modules do you want us to do before we meet again? And we would tell them, well, if you could do the first module, that would be great. And then we would point out that in total, the first module, the videos are less than 20 minutes. So it's totally doable. Right now, all the videos we have it totals an hour. So it's really easy to drop in and do or not. So it's the timing thing, I think, that I wish people would understand. Really, it's not that much.
We have one more from Laura. Do you know more about the new discovery layer? Is it based on an existing platform or new, and how it relates to BibFrame and the output of cataloging activities?
So the new discovery layer is attached to our Folio implementation. So it's getting data from Folio, which is sort of, if you watch the videos and just every time you hear Voyager, just substitute Folio, because at the time we were working in Voyager and now we're working in Folio. So basically, catalogers work in Marva to develop their bibliographic description, and then they send it back to Folio where it's saved as MARC. And then the discovery layer uses Folio to populate its fields. And then the library is continuing to send out as part of its distribution service records in MARC because that is an obligation we have. And thank you, May, for putting up the link to the training modules.
We still have a few minutes left if anyone has any questions that have popped up. Everyone's still processing.
It's okay.
I know,
It's a lot.
Yeah, we have your contact. Thank you so much
Yes.
for that wonderful overview and for all of the resources that y'all are providing. It's a great presentation. Thank you, Trina.
Thank you so much.
And we have a few minutes before our next presentation, but Jeremy, if you want to get your slides queued up, we can hold it there.
Right.
Beautiful. We'll wait for just a few more minutes in case anyone wanted to pop in for your talk. For folks just joining us, we start in about 2 minutes. Suspense is killing me. I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to go with the introduction. Um, so thank you everyone for stopping in for this lightning talk today using Milvus as an RDF graph vector store for AI agents. This presentation is by Jeremy Nelson, a software engineer at Stanford University Libraries. He was on the team that migrated Stanford to Folio and is active developer in Sinopia linked data editor and Blue Core projects. His research interests include applying AI to improving library workflows. Jeremy?
All right, thank you very much. So what I'll be doing today is just showing you or give a brief overview of what Milvus is and how we're using it as an RDF graph, and also a process of how we're planning to use it in Bluestore. So what Bluestore is what we call the database component of Blue Core. And Blue Core is a collaboration that really envisions a shared linked data environment to bring BibFrame cataloging to production. And so as we were working on the Blue Core stack, we really wanted to think about ways we could leverage the growth and expansion of generative AI, and in particular, how we can use these technologies to assist catalogers in their linked data workflows. We're developing at Blue Core a RDF vector store, and I'll talk a little bit of what a vector store is, and to store RDF triples for BibFrame work and instances. And in our initial development of the prototype, we started work on an AI agent for detecting work and instant duplicates using this vector store. So here's a diagram of the Blue Core technology stack. On the left, you see Sinopia and Marva, which are existing linked data editors. We also have a helper application called the Graph Toolbox. And you can also use Blue Core if you're familiar with Jupyter Notebooks. So all of these different sort of user-facing applications use an authentication technology called Keycloak. And through Keycloak, then these applications can use the Blue Core API. And the API itself will leverage and use LLMs or large language model AI agents, along with a workflow engine called Airflow to manage more long-standing jobs. And then sort of in the back end, we have a Postgres database that actually stores the works and instances and other resources. And then with the focus on this lightning talk is actually a triples vector store. So when we talk about this vector store, it's really, I like to think of it as a naive graph knowledge base. So each BibFrame working instance has one or more versions that are stored in the Blue Core database. And then in those versions, we take a serialized N triples version as a list of RDF triples. And each one of these triples we store as a separate semantic document in the Vectorstore. So what that means is that we then take each one of the triples and then create or transform it into a embedding. And here is a partial display of that vector. And it's just a large list of floats or numbers. And then as part of that, we store with each vector some metadata. So we store the text of the triple, the URI of the resource, and then the version ID into Milvus along with those vector documents. So once we have those as vectors, then we can do a vector search to match these incoming triples or as a part of a retrieval augmented generation or RAG workflow for LLM, a large language model based agents like the duplication agent that we're working on. And these agents use both LLMs, system prompts, and external tools to sort of construct a workflow. And it also includes feedback from the cataloger who's working on it. The duplication agent and also will include prompts for weighting certain triples like a main title and contributors as part of that prompt to increase the weighting when it does a match based on the Milvus vector search. Now, this AI duplication agent takes this incoming RDF resource, serializes it to in triples, and then creates the triples embedding. Then it queries Milvus to find the best matches for the incoming RDF vectors. It will then evaluate the results and return scores for best matching works and instances. Our intention is that it can be run within the Blue Core editors, and that's looking towards more of the MVP than the current prototype. And then we hope to have it implemented at least in a demonstratable view in the Graph Toolbox. The AI duplication agent can also be run when they're doing batch loads within the Blue Core workflows DAGs, or directed acyclic graph, which is just a fancy name for a particular workflow in Airflow. Sort of looking towards the MVP to help you be able to enable these agents to be able to use Blue Core and the Milvus Vectorstore. We'll be looking at a technology called Model Context Protocol, or MCP, which is just a standard way for defining an interface between standard systems and large language models. The Blue Core AI agents will use the API as an MCP server for searching, editing, and initiating workflows. And then with the API as an MCP server, you'll also be able to use the Blue Core API with LLMs like Claude Desktop, which is sort of exciting that you won't be just restricted to the existing editors or the Graph Toolbox. So here's some links to everything I've mentioned before. And what I thought I would do is kind of show you a quick demo for the last couple of minutes of what this may look like. So this is a Jupyter notebook. And after importing some necessary packages, I create a Milvus client, and then I use a constrained bound description from the Library of Congress to start to ingest into the data store. So the first thing, we're just grabbing that CBD file, creating a graph and parsing it. And here you can see what this CBD graph looks like. We have an instance, and then we have another instance. And in this case, we also have the bib framework. So that is then, I read that file in, and then I posted it to a locally running version of the API that ingests it into the Blue Core database. Excuse me. Then we're querying for that version. And so I can run that again. And this version is just a particular point in time for this work. And then finally, I call this function that we have in our Blue Core models that ingests that version into Milvus. So now that's there, I created a quick example graph where you can see here, just using the RDF lib, we create the URI, we add a type of work, and then we create a title, and using part of the title description from our example. So when I serialize that graph, you can see here it's a very simple, not very many triples, like maybe 4, where we have our example work that we define it as a work, and then the BF title. And then as a blank node, we have the BF title, and then the main title that we've set up here. Then we take those triple or this graph, and then we serialize it as n triples, and then we strip off the ending period. And so here we can see is a list of those triples, and there's the blank node with the title. Here's the actual RDF statement of what type of class it is, and then the main title that links that instance, and then the actual text itself. So then we then take those triples and we encode each one of those lines as example vectors. And then to show you, I can quickly do this. And I'll just show you the first vector. And there you can see it's a really long list, 768 floats. And then we query our search database. So I include what collection name it is, and then the output. And then we can see here we have the matches, and we matched both on the work and the title. And so from these, this would then be passed on to the LLM, which then can make a determination of whether this incoming resource is a match or not. So I think I'm out of time. So Matthew, okay.
Yep, you were right at time, but there's no one after you. So
Okay.
if you want to have anything to close up, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay. So Milvus comes, I'm just using the default vector model. And those vectors are using, here, let me show you this. All right, so this default embedding function, let's see if we can get more details about this. And so the default is this paraphrase Albert Onyx, but you can also specify different models to use. And so it's a BERT model or a variant BERT model that's generating the vectors. And we right now haven't tried different models, but certainly that's easily enough to do with Milvus. So those vectors, I guess, so how the vectors are determined by Milvus, well, I don't think I have time to really go through how the full details of how the vector is generated, but it uses that model to tokenize each character and to determine where that exists in a multidimensional space. And then it combines all those different floats that you saw, those float values, to determine sort of its location in the semantic space. As you generate these vectors and store them, then the database itself, when you run different searches, it finds and there's different ways, different algorithms you can use to determine sort of the distance between your example vector and the existing vectors to find a sort of a semantic similarity between those. Yes, the Milvus is an open source vector database. So, and it's actually used quite a bit in other industries that are also looking at using LLMs and RAG in their workflows.
And we do still have time for questions if anyone else has any questions for Jeremy.
Right. Thank you all, and I hope in a future, maybe next year's LD4P or LD4 conference, we'll maybe do an update on this to show you actually working agents and with Blue Core. So thank you very much, everyone.
Very exciting. I look forward already to next year, and we're not even done with this year. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jeremy, and for everyone else who presented today. We do have one more session. We have a social session happening at 30 after the hour, and that's going to be trivia held by the social committee. So hopefully you have time to stick around, but thanks everyone who was able to attend today.